want to give you enough time to be able to grab a bite to eat before you get back to work. Behavioral economics, that's a very interesting topic. It is something actually that's been around for a long time. I remember working at Sears on their good, better, best merchandising strategy, and that was more than 37 years ago. It's becoming a lot more important, and we'll talk a lot about that as we get into the presentation. So the source of a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today is based on a great book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's quite an undertaking to read. It has incredible insights on behavioral economics. Danielle Kahneman has actually won a Nobel Prize based on the insights on what drives people to make irrational decisions. In addition, B-Works is an organization that specializes in behavioral economics. I recommend that you visit their website. They do conduct webinars and workshops. It'd be something I would recommend highly you undertake to kind of sharpen your skills. So the question really for a lot of people, and they ask, what is behavioral economics? What does it stand for? And I'm hoping that today's presentation is going to help define what behavioral economics is all about and examples of how it applies to marketing, specifically consumer packaged good companies. So if you think of the way consumers buy products, there's two dimensions, there's two sides of the brain. There is what traditional economics, which is the rational side. You know, we give the consumer an incentive to buy this product. You know, based on the incentive, they should be able to, they're most apt to buy that product. On the flip side is the behavioral economics, which is the irrational purchase decision. And actually, what I'm going to share with you today is most purchase decisions are done irrationally. They're not done rationally. So what we often think as being a great incentive, a great strategy, is debunked by the consumer because they think very differently, very irrational. We're going to talk about heuristic and biases. These are the triggers that drive people to act irrationally. There are also the leverage points that allow brand marketers to understand how you can use consumer behavior, that irrational behavior, to drive market share, to drive sales, and to nudge the consumer towards purchasing your product. You know, simply put, behavioral economics is economics that predict illogical human behavior. And I think the important point here is that it predicts illogical human behavior, which is one of the hardest things to accomplish. It's easy to think rationally about what the strategy is and how it's going to impact sales. It's a lot harder to understand the illogical consumer behavior. And when you look at this irrational consumer behavior, there are many factors that come into play in this irrational behavior. These are just many of the biases that drive consumers to buy brands, to react to offers and promotions, and to provide brand loyalty. Now I'm going to stop and pause and ask this question. There'll be a poll on the screen for you to fill out. Have you purchased a lottery ticket in the past month? Just answer yes and no. I think the lottery, the Ontario lottery, is at $77 million. I'm sure a lot of us can envision what that would do to our lifestyle if we won that lottery. I have bought a ticket, but please answer on the screen. Have you bought a ticket or not? Let's pull out the poll. No, 80% have said no, yes, 20%. Well, if you were those 20% of the respondents, you purchased that ticket based on behavioral economics, based on the illusion of control. It's about the idea that you have a chance of winning that lottery. It's about availability bias. It's about the idea that if you don't buy the ticket, there's a high likelihood you're not going to win. And so there's a lot of these biases that are driving you to buy those tickets. And we're going to get into it in greater detail. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of biases. There's just many. And I welcome you to take a look at these biases because these influence every day the decisions you actually make. And I think it's important as a design firm, brand consulting firm, to understand that some of these biases are also how you're going to evaluate creative. Are you bringing to the evaluation of what's being presented to you, an ad campaign, a package design, are you bringing to that meeting some of your own biases that you may want to leave at the doorstep? And we'll share with some of these biases. But again, take a look at these and share them with your friends and evaluate which ones of these are influencing your purchase decision, your business decisions. So here's an example of bias. The same person is playing a violin on the street and looks like he's begging for money. And the value of that individual is zero. Yeah, may play great music, but really the context of where he is playing sets the value proposition of what he's offering. But that same individual is playing in an orchestra in front of an audience, and the value of that performance is $65 to $200. And that is what behavioral economics, these are the triggers that determine value. So let's talk about how that happens in the marketplace. And there are really two factors, heuristic and biases. And very often they get mixed up between the two. And I'm going to help debunk and separate what these two are. Heuristics are the shortcuts that humans use to make decisions. They use their reptilian brain, the oldest part of the brain, the brains that we have in our head, to make those decisions. It's the brain that drives the flight for security, the impulse, the way we react very quickly. And it's a result of the complexity of the world. And as the world becomes a lot more complex, more choices, more anxiety, more things that we need to deal with, the more we rely on our heuristic side of our brain. And biases is slightly different. Bias is the outcome of heuristic behavior. It's the gap between the rational and the irrational is the bias, right? And to put that in greater context, it's looking at these different behaviors. For example, the heuristic one here is people make decisions based on representation, group of individuals. When you look at that context, and that's the heuristic factor, when you transpose that into the biases, it could be groupthink, status quo, belief biases, false memory, bandwagoning. These are all biases are driven by this heuristic element of representation. And the implication are police profiling, racism, corporate silos. These are just some of the many outcomes of what are these various biases. So I hope I've explained what is heuristic, what is bias, and the outcome. Another example of heuristic bias is availability. This is a great one. You hear of a plane going down, and everyone wants, the immediate reaction is we don't want to get on a flight. We don't want to get on the plane. And the reality is there are very few crashes that happen when you think of the number of flights that happen. But the immediacy of that information is driving our decision, the way we rationalize these decisions. And this is important. As a brand marketer, that means awareness. Creating that awareness before the purchase is really important because it's that awareness that happens prior to the purchase that's going to drive that purchase. And these are some of the other examples. Like I said, let's identify the news has a huge play. What we noticed in the news at that moment, that day, has a huge impact on how we approach purchases and make decisions. It isn't the total sum of all the news we take in the world. It's that one moment, what the media has highlighted and brought to our attention that has an influence. Think of COVID and the vaccine, how much of our decisions and behaviors are driven by what the media are saying. When you look at the greater context of the world, it's just a small piece of what's impacting mankind. Another heuristic aspect is our emotions. We call it the blink factor, making an emotional connection to between the consumer and the brand. A lot of those emotions are driven by moods. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you frustrated? We all know that if you have a high degree of anxiety, it is really hard to make the right decision. So putting the consumer in the right mood, creating the right tone is really pivotal in shifting and modifying the behavior. And we'll show you some examples later on how that impacts behavior. Confirmation bias, we've seen that most recently in the US election, right? What you confirms your beliefs, in other words, what you believe is true, that the elections were rigged versus the objective fact that they weren't. Somewhere in between those two is what you see. And depending on your reliance on the media and your belief on the media is telling you is true or not true will have a huge impact on this bias, this confirmation bias. And then just bring that down to fact-based information. We have just completed a major study on the future of real. How do consumers differentiate between real and false? And interesting enough, when the consumer is overloaded with information, when the source of that information is coming from a source that is unknown, interesting enough, they trust their intuition and their conventional wisdom. In essence, what this is telling you is that when people have too many choices, when consumers have too many choices, or if the choices come from information they're not familiar with, that their heuristic behavior and biases kick in a high gear. So if you think of the shopping in a supermarket, you think of the choices being offered in that supermarket and the complexity and the anxiety of not capturing COVID, these all play to our heuristic attitudes and approaches and our biases in what we will buy in the store. Anchoring is another one. And we'll get to that later on in the presentation, full examples. But anchoring, think of it, is we make decisions based on comparables. We make decisions not in isolation, but how that product fits within the entire offering. If we're looking at a shelf, it's not just the one brand of tea that impacts our purchase decision. It's the context of that tea across other brands and the pricing of other brands. And we call that anchoring. It has a huge impact. If you think of the software industry, they've used anchoring as an effective way to upsell customers. The Dunning-Kruger effect, which is basically the more you become knowledgeable of something, the more you realize how little you know. And so we just have to look at the ex-president of the United States, where he played on this factor in an immense way, where he really doesn't know anything, but he's an expert. And if he really knew and really understood all of the nuances and all the facts and all the decisions that had to be made, he would realize how little he really knew. There's status quo. We are very reluctant to make changes. And this, we witness this in brand transformations. We witness this when we're asking companies to go through major changes, to rethink their business model. We get a lot of pushback. And why is it? Because of status quo bias. Being familiar with where we are is a lot safer than taking a risk on somewhere where we're really not sure. And so our status quo bias plays an important role. And for you brand marketers, what's important to understand is making decisions based on the status quo really limits the opportunities. Incrementalist approaches to brand marketing really are one of the factors of status quo bias. Taking bold steps are risky. Staying close to home and looking at incremental changes is a lot safer in our minds. And that's driven by this bias. So just key takeaway, people are not rational in most purchase decisions. And we really need to understand biases and how they influence the purchase decision and the role they play in marketing. And that's what we're going to talk about. It's great to have all of these kind of philosophies and principles, but how do they apply to marketing? So I'm going to cover only 7. I mean, I actually had about 120 slides, but we only have time for these 7. I just randomly selected these: the power of free, social proof, scarcity, loss aversion, framing, anchoring, and choice paradox. So let's go through them. So the power of free. First of all, we need to understand that whenever we talk price, whenever we talk numbers, it's actually painful for our brain. And why is it painful? Because we're asking our brain to do calculations. And if you've ever crammed for an exam, you know that that puts a huge extortion on our brain power, on our processing power of our brain. And we try and avoid that as human beings. We try and avoid using heavy use of our brain. That's where heuristics play an important role. So when you think of the power of free, here's an example of a study. These are fact-based studies. When consumers are given a choice between offering free and a sure discount, and by the way, the values the consumer would take home between the sure discount, likelihood of free were exactly the same. But guess what? Free won out. Free won out because consumers feel they're getting more with free. And where does that play in marketing? It's the buy one, get one free. Right? We see that in merchandising and product offering. It's a great platform to trade up the consumer, to have them buy more, take them out of the marketplace longer so that you don't lose them to your competition. But it can also be giving them an opportunity of accelerating the sense towards free. So loyalty programs are a great way. And if you offer free with 10 or you offer free with 12, but the first 2 you give away on the card, on the one on the right, you actually accelerate the completion time to complete the card. You've given them an incentive, psychological incentive towards getting closer to free. So think of how the offers, your loyalty programs, can you accelerate to free? So some strategies here. Consider the incremental factor in driving multiple purchase. We used to do work for Kodak. Consumers would buy 1.5 rolls of film. To get them to buy 2 rolls of film didn't take much incentive. To get them to buy 3 took a little bit more, but the consumer was willing to buy 3 rolls of film. And so developing an incentive program that trade them up to buying 3 rolls of film, took them out of the market, allowed for a significant sales increase. So look at that model of free. Buy 3, get 1 free. Provide a free trial size to help drive. And this was very common in the personal care category, where you're providing trial samples of the shampoos to get the consumer to buy it. Also think of trial at sampling within the retail environment. We know that sampling your product drives sales. Again, create a multiple purchase program through a loyalty strategy to trade them up. And then I would recommend that you also look at subscription programs that are now taking a lot of interest. And actually, we have just completed another study on subscription programs that we'll be releasing this month. And I think you'll find it very interesting how powerful subscription programs can be for your brand. So let's move on to the next one. Social proof. We've all witnessed this one, and actually this category has gained a lot of traction as, we hear social marketing, how do we move from conventional marketing to influencer and celebrity endorsements? Part of that is online product reviews, also known as the halo effect. And so how other people see a brand has a huge impact on how you perceive that brand and what's going to motivate you to buy that brand. Most consumers indicate that they will not buy a brand unless there is a 4 to 5 star review of that brand. Irrespective of where the review comes from, if the review is valid or not, it has a huge drive in how consumers buy brands and perceive brands through this halo effect. In fact, again, in this study that we did on the future of real, You can see here that online product ratings and reviews are one of the key factors that drive trust in brands and what the brand offers, followed by experts, packaging claims. So these are important factors. This third-party validation, this halo impact is really important. And then celebrity endorsements is another factor. Nespresso built their entire platform on George Clooney, carrying his kind of sophisticated image to the brand and elevating the brand. So again, piggybacking on credibility of someone that everybody likes, having that halo impact against the brand is a very effective way of building a brand and building recognition for that brand very quickly. Obviously, if you're a packaged good company, packaged flashes, packaged statements, third-party endorsement flashes, maybe WWF or from Fair Trade, these have huge impact on the perception of the brand. It has that halo impact that will actually create a bias for your brand and drive sales. And these are just some of the examples. So again, social proof strategies that you may want to take a look at, leveraging experts within the industry and having them speak about your brand, third-party endorsement from somebody. Celebrities approval endorsements from celebrities, another strategy. Just make sure that you select the right celebrity. As you can see, it's a double-edged sword. Alexander Keith unfortunately selected the wrong celebrity to endorse their brand. He was a pedophile. Unfortunately, that had a huge negative impact on the brand for a short period of time. Users, approval and ratings from users, a really effective way of building your credibility. Look at Amazon, and a lot of the e-commerce platforms have used that effectively. The wisdom of crowds, which is the ratings of products by consumers. And then friends, through social marketing, your friends recommending products has a huge impact, halo impact on your perception and your likelihood of buying those brands. So you can see behavioral economics have a huge impact. These biases have a huge impact on how they influence our purchase decision. Companies like Amazon have leveraged behavioral economics to drive sales within their platform. We've all been victims, if you like, of behavioral economics by the online industry and the banking and investment community. Scarcity is another very effective bias. Placing a higher value on an object that is scarce. Think of diamonds. Let's be candid. There's an abundance of diamonds. The diamond industry has centralized and controlled pricing through controlled distribution and image building. Technically, a diamond is a rock. They've elevated the perception of that rock, if you like, that commodity item by controlling the channel, the amount that's available. This is a great example of scarcity bias. How many of you lined up for an Apple iPhone, right? They've done a great example of creating this sense of scarcity and demand before even, months before the new phones are launched. People are lining up or ordering them and then lining up to make that purchase. Again, Apple is a master in leveraging scarcity and driving sales. Other scarcities is hoarding, if you like, a sense of limited number of SKUs available, which is driving the consumer to buy more. So, identifying low stock availability is another way of doing it. Provide exclusive offers to consumers that are either time limited, have unique features. I remember working with a retailer where they call them confidence items. These products were only on sale for a month, and they had these unique features that consumers were looking for and seeking. And so that created this exclusive demand, this sense of scarcity, driving consumers to buy. Think of Christmas gifts. I remember launching, Cabbage Patch Kids, and people were fighting in the stores to buy the dolls because there's a limited number of dolls available. Scarcity is a very effective way of driving impulse purchases and heightened demand and multiple purchase. So I'm going to pause here and ask this question. Move my hole out of my way. I can't see it. See, you own a stock and need to decide which you need to sell. Stock A, a decline in the past month and historically being stable, or stock B increased by 15% in the past month. Which stock would you sell? Be interesting to see what you'd say. And this sets up another bias. Let's see if we've all been prone to this. But I know I have just recently. I sold some stocks and see what the outcome is. Checking our watch, and we're in good shape. You know, these biases help us understand, yeah, increased by 50% of the past months. Yes, you know what? You've all fallen the fear of loss. This is what the insurance companies have leveraged. You've actually validated a study that was done in the book Fast and Slow, where they studied, when do consumers buy? They hold on to stocks that are not doing well because it's called the sunken cost bias. You've invested money in that stock and you're reluctant to let it go because you've invested that money. You're better off selling the stock you've made money than selling the stock you've lost money, because you would have to admit a loss, which is painful. And most consumers avoid that fear of loss. And so hence, that's how the stock market makes a lot of money. So let's just move on to the next one, which leads to the loss aversion bias, which we've just witnessed. And there's many more loss aversions. Go back one. So when you look at loss aversions, and when we look at happiness versus pain, loss versus gain, you can see that the pain of losing is much bigger than the happiness of gaining. And this is important. And this, where this comes to play in the CPG and in the brand marketing, is how many times have we been involved on assignments where we know that the strategy is not right, or the product innovation that we're working on is not right, but we're holding on to it because of this fear of loss. We've sunk all that money and that time and energy. It should work. If we give it just a little bit longer, if we try a little bit harder, we're going to be successful. But the reality is we're leveraging those decisions by this fear of loss bias, this sense of that if we give up, we're going to be having significant pain, which we want to avoid. So an area that has done really, really well leveraging this, as we just witnessed in the stock, is the investment community, their strategy. This is right in their playbook. This is what they do every day. They play on this bias in a very effective way. And again, if you look at online, the word deals appear much more than save in this orbit. Again, they're talking about this deals, about reinforcing this fear of loss. Deals talks about this idea that you may lose something if you don't capitalize on this. And this is just one of many tactics the industry has used to create this, leveraging this fear of loss, the pain of losing. But there's other tactics you can look at. Limited time only. For example, Black Friday is a perfect example of the fear of loss, right? Limited time offers, premium offer not available to everyone, an introduction of special features, or this fear, this loss aversion strategy you can leverage. So think of promotions that you're doing for your brands. You put the statement limited time only, limited number of units for sale, limited to 2 items per customer. Think of tissue paper, right? You're going to drive more sales. You're going to drive a sense of urgency in buying those products, and a sense of fear of loss if you don't capitalize on that promotion, that offer. And we're all prone to these strategies. If we think of Christmas, Black Friday, Singles Day in China, the #1 day of sales, the highest number of sales in one day in China. These are all loss aversion strategies that we are vulnerable to and can capitalize on as a brand marketer. Framing. Framing is, we call it the blink factor. You know, who would have not thought 30 years ago when we coined the phrase the blink factor, that it was all about framing. And framing is really about the visual manifestation of the context versus the facts. It's, again, talking to the heuristic needs, this idea of shorthand, making quick decisions, right? So depending on where you place your item in the store, we all know that if you place your item at eye level, you're going to sell a lot more products. We think of shoppability of the product plays an important role. For example, there was a study done around proximity, and this study was in Google's cafeteria, and it was all about the proximity of the breakfast station to the snack bar. And the closer the two were, the higher the incidence the consumer was buying the snacks. And why is that? Because the snacks were in the frame of vision. They were enticing the consumer to make that purchase when they were getting their beverages. Whereas the further away they were, it was out of their sight of line. It was no longer in visual context to the purchase decision. So think of impulse items at the checkout. If you're a CPG brand that sells to C stores, think of that frame of reference, this idea that the closer you are to being visible within that purchase decision, the higher the impact is in the consumer buying your product. But it goes way beyond that. Again, the blink factor is about color and shape and textures. And so, you know, interesting enough, they did this study, and these different shapes actually connotate different feelings, different taste profiles for the consumer. So think of your package, your structural design. Is it communicating visually, subconsciously to this framing, to how it talks to their taste profiles and their needs, their aspirational and emotional needs? It's also the number of, I call it hero shot on your packaging. Interesting in this study, the more pretzels you put on the package, the more the consumer consumes those products. You know, if you're a snack brand and you want the consumer to buy more of your snack product so that they can buy more often the bag of chips or pretzels in this case, the more pretzels you put on the package, research has shown the more they're going to consume those products quicker. And so are you doing that on your packaging? Density of color, impact of color plays an important role. Less color saturation, more expensive. The brighter the color, we've seen that. You know, why is it that President's Choice is muted colors? And why is it that the no name is bright yellow? Because primary colors communicate value, whereas muted colors say premiumness. So are you using the right color in your packaging? Because those are quality cues that talk to the consumer, this framing. So framing strategies, explore visual cues that reflect an emotional need, very important. Consider your packaging in the context of the category, not just the competitor. So shoppability is really important, the frame of reference. Do you stand out within your competitors? Do you stand out within the category? Take into consideration package format, shapes, and sizes. Think of the Tetley round canister that we developed close to 25 years ago, how it stands out from all the competitive set, how it stands out not only in the store, but on the shelves in the consumer's home. And then leverage storytelling to copy to set the tone. These are all key important framing opportunities for you as a brand marketer. Anchoring. This is an area where the software industry has done an amazing job. This is a test that was done for beverage, beer beverage. They had a premium decor and they had a bargain decor, and then they had the brands they wanted to sell, which is premium beer and bargain beer. By having the premium decor and the bargain decor, which they sold very few of them, they drove more sales for their premium beer and their bargain beer. Again, consumers, when they make their buying decisions, they use anchoring. They use what is the most expensive product, and then what's the cheapest product, and where do I want to buy within this range of products. And anchoring helps you move the consumer to the category you want to sell, to the price point you want to sell. Software industry has done that, where they always show 3 or 4 prices. Think of Salesforce. Look at the a lot of the online platforms. They have an anchoring price, which is crazy number. You would never buy it. There's no value in it. And then you have a low end price that limits pretty well everything. You can't really use the program. It's more of a trial. And then there's the middle prices, which are the ones you're going to gravitate because of the extremes. And this is very common in software. It's uncommon in selling insurance programs. And it should be a strategy you take. Sears did it a long time ago with the good, better, best strategy. You know, they had this best product that was, you know, twice the price of the middle point. And that drove sales to the middle point where Sears made all their money. So are you using anchoring as a strategy to grow your business? An example of that was The Economist. This is the power of it. The Economist had 3 offers. You could subscribe to the online and magazine, print subscription only, or online only. They gave you the 3. And then they did a test and they took out the print subscription out of the equation. And it had a huge impact because they eliminated a point of reference, a value point of reference. And you can see the difference. They had a 30% decrease by eliminating the middle anchoring point. And so really think of this when you're looking at a portfolio of products. For example, I'll use Pepsi's products. You know, you've got Miss Vicky's regular flavors, and then you've got Miss Vicky's signature. You know, how do you create that anchor that's going to drive consumers to buy more of the Miss Vicky's products versus other chips within the categories by providing an anchor? And maybe the strategy you should have had the low end, which in this case would be the private label brand. So think of exploring good, better, best product strategies, maybe leveraging the private label brand as the bottom. Size, formats, quality cues, flavor options, and then pricing. Create a bargain decor offering fewer features. We do that a lot in retail. You know, we call it a flanker brand that allows the core brand to maintain its margins by having a discount brand to fight with the discount competitors, and consider, as I said, flanker brands. These are just some of the many examples. Choice paradox. This is probably where most brands have the greatest opportunity. You know, when you think of the supermarket, you think of all of the choices. You think that when you take into context that, you know, 20 years ago, the average supermarket had 40,000 products. And today, the average supermarket has 100,000 products. Think of all the new products that get launched every year. It has a huge impact on this paradox of choice. There was a test done where they were offering 6 jams or 24 jams. And although the 24 jam did well at attracting the customer's attention, as you can see, it did very poorly at driving sales. And the reason for that was too much choice. Consumers tend to block out, postpone purchase decisions when they have too much choice to be made. So simplifying that choice becomes really important in environments where there's a lot of complexity of choice. So you look at Costco versus Walmart. Costco, you take a toothpaste, they have 4 brands, and Walmart has 60 brands of toothpaste, right? Costco's really smart. They say, you know, let's simplify the consumer. Let's sell them. Let's limit the choices they have, and let's make it easier for them to sell their product. And obviously, Costco has done extremely well growing their business. And again, these are 2 different strategies. So sampling is an effective tool in overcoming complexity of choice. So when you look at retail channels, you know, what's your sampling strategy? And are you doing sampling? And this is a great way of enticing the consumer. It's also another bias around free. Featured items, end caps, promotional. This is Dove. You know, what's your activation strategy at store level? And are you overcoming this complexity of choice? So some additional strategies: leverage new flashes is a great way. It separates that product from the rest of the crowd, rest of variety, helping the consumer focus. Ensure greater variety and or flavor differentiation. So as within your variety, are you clearly differentiating the different flavors? Explore breaking large portfolio offerings into sub-brands. If you think of President's Choice, how they segmented, when they started was President's Choice, then they segmented between organic and gluten-free and their premium line. to make it easier for consumers to make their buying decisions and reduce that complexity of choice. The idea of secondary displays within the store environment, and then obviously in-store promotional activities at shelf level, end caps. These all help solve this complexity of choice and the complexity, trying to overcome this complexity of choice, paradox of choice bias. So in conclusion, I just want to wrap this up. I'm just looking, we've got another 10 minutes, 15 minutes for questions. We're all more biased than we realize. So when you think of next time you go shopping or buying insurance or going online to look at Netflix or buying from Amazon, look at what's happening. How are they serving up the information? How are you making your buying decisions? How are they swaying you through some of these biases and heuristic tools into buying something that they want you to buy versus maybe something that you're considering to buy? But also look at biases when you're making your strategic decisions. Are you bringing biases to the table? Are you filtering those decisions based on a fear of change? Are you filtering these to avoid pain? I mean, how are you filtering your decisions when hiring a design firm and working through that design process? Perception is easily swayed. What we see is what we believe. All we had to do is look at fake news and how consumers were swayed, how the media has a huge influence, and how online ratings can influence immensely how we see brands and how we evaluate brands and how they influence our purchase decision. Experimenting is key in the strategic foresight. So, when next time you go to market and you look at a promotional activity or a marketing activity, look at some of these tools. On I think slide 5 or 6, I listed all of the biases. There's hundreds of them. Which ones can you leverage to help influence the purchase decision and drive your brand sales? And obviously, we need to be ethical about leveraging biases. We need to be careful how these are leveraged to sway consumer behavior. In the Future of Real study that we'll be sharing in April, it has a huge implication on brand trust. It has a huge implication on long-term equity of your brand. If consumers see you as being unethical or influence your purchase decision in a negative way. And so be very careful how you leverage these consumer biases and these behaviors in driving sales for your brand. So we have some additional topics we'd like to share with you here. I'd love to get your input before we wrap this up. Which of the following topics would be relevant for future workshops? The Future Real. Are consumers differentiating between real and fact, and how do brands remain authentic? This is a huge study we just completed. The growth of alternative communities. What new community behaviors has the pandemic created, and how does this impact brands? And then the last one is taking the long view. How strategic foresight is gaining importance on avoiding disruption. Love to know from you which of these topics you would find relevant in a future webinar. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to make your selection. Love to see what the outcomes are. And I hope you found value in behavioral economics. I hope that you're going to read the book, Thinking Slow and Fast. It's a large book. I listen to it while I'm out jogging in the morning. It's about 350 pages, but it has unbelievable insights. And again, how would you apply these principles to when you're evaluating your marketing strategies? What is the role of behavioral economics today? I think a lot of firms do not incorporate behavioral economics in their strategy. It has a huge influence on what you can do and the outcomes of how you can influence purchase decisions, hopefully ethically. Give it a couple more minutes, and the outcomes of the Future Real. 46% would like to see a presentation on that. That's great, because we'll be doing that in April. The growth of alternative communities. So an outcrop of the study we did on the Future Real was that there is the development of new communities, and they have very different attitude towards brands. and we'll see where that, and so we're going to do a deeper dive on that in June of this year as part of a major North American study. And taking the long view, 31% of you. So strategic foresight, we'd love to then conduct a webinar of strategic foresight and taking the long view. Some of the companies we work with actually have strategic foresight consultants within the organization, helping them guide the long view of their brand. This idea of quarterly results, the pandemic's demonstrated that we can easily be disrupted. Anyways, I'm going to open it up. If you have any questions, we have the chat there box. Please ask us if you have any questions. The keynote, we're going to post this presentation so that you have it available to you. You can share with your colleagues. Yeah, presentation PDF format, we will. Where's found? I will email you after the, yeah, what else? All right. Yeah, no questions. So let me ask you a question. You know, have you leveraged the behavioral economics in the way you go to market for your brands? Or is that something you would consider in the future? Welcome your thoughts here in the chat. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time and your attention to this presentation. Oh, here, say definitely consider more in the future. Super interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marie-Claire, Nancy. Thank you very much. So, folks, thank you for your time. We've given you 12 minutes for lunch. So, thank you. Have a great rest of the week. And we look forward to catching up with you on the next webinar. Thank you very much. Bye now.